Okay, so it is really cool that I get to speak tonight. This is something that was near and dear to my heart. I do have Bible verses situated, but not really anything directly as one whole chapter or one section of verses. So it's all kind of all over the place. But I want to talk about compassion. God has been smacking me around over the last 3 to 4 months, teaching me about compassion. And I think that everybody can say that, you know what compassion is. You know how to be compassionate. And I think I do too, but I think I also took it kind of for granted, and I think I kind of rolled the normal ropes and direction, as it were. I know it sounds very ominous right now, but I think you'll understand once I get further on. So let me open up in prayer, and then I'll continue on. Lord, I'm so grateful to be able to be here today and to give the word. I'm thankful for everything that you do in my life with Candy, with our church, with our community, and with everybody that surrounds us. I'm so grateful for this group of people, for the ability to speak, and for being sent as your servant to speak, Lord. I find this as a great honor, and I praise you, and I love you. Amen. Amen. All right, so right off the bat, I want to go to the definition of compassion. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary says compassion is the sympathetic consciousness of others' distress, together with a desire to alleviate it. Okay, so you want to fix it. You want to be there for that person. Now, empathy, just as a comparison, refers to the emotional response, which is active sharing in the experience of the other person. Whereas, like I said, compassion is wanting to fix or alleviate the distress. In Colossians 3, it says, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against one another, forgiving one another as the Lord has forgiven you, so you might also forgive." I think this is very important as a part of compassion, not only towards the person, but the person towards you, potentially, whatever the case might be. Galatians, I'm going to go straight into Galatians as well. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." And this one I like a lot, because what did Christ do for us but bear all of our burdens? And he took it all onto him. So I want to continue by asking the question, which is the question that I was kind of put in front of me. I had put in front of me, which is, if one shows compassion, does one compromise one's values, faith, or morals? I would say no. But have we potentially become lax in the compassion towards others because of social norms and social media and other social constructs, society, community, whatever it is? Yes. So even in wanting so desperately to do God's will, we compromise. And as everybody can probably say, in one's life, you don't want to compromise. You don't want to put your values short, your morals short, but you move. You're malleable. And sometimes you end up doing it even though you don't want to. So when we have certain issues that we deal with, do we hold back on our compassion? Are we able to see the entire picture or situation? I would argue that we fall into a bias of the situation. The social norms that are bombarded into our heads chisels away at our compassion, and we fall victim to what society wants, what society expects. In turn, when we show compassion, we are weak because we are not following the rules, which is the rules of society. We have free will, freedom of thought, and the ability to have full compassion, but most likely won't follow through. A lot of times, we won't be able to be truly compassionate to the fullest extent. Now, what I mean is, I worked at Easter Seals. When I first started at Easter Seals, I had a lot of compassion for the boys that I worked with. I loved them. Never stopped loving them. Never stopped caring about them. But the societal construct that eventually ended up in the facility that I worked at and Easter Seals changed the ability to be fully compassionate. And what I mean is that we started out being able to be consequential and have accountability. But that doesn't mean that we're not being compassionate. I would argue that in a given circumstance, having a consequence and or accountability is part of being compassionate, right? So another example that I was kind of thinking of is the view or the perspective of the people with disabilities in the 1980s. What was that view? That view was, oh, they're different. They're scary. I don't want to talk to them because I don't know what they're about. They look weird. They don't act normal. They are different in every manner compared to what I, as a person, am towards them. A homeless person with a mental illness that looks scary. We move away instead of reaching out a helping hand. Natural reaction. We have a caution about us, sure. But what prevents us from going to that person and talking to them? You don't know. And so that's what I mean about holding back with compassion and not being able to be fully compassionate. 2 Corinthians says, "Blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." So, the premise is that the same compassion, that unwavering love that Christ gave for us, continues to give for us, is exactly what we need to strive for to give to others, regardless of our biases, regardless of what we think society wants, what we're taught, what is constantly ingrained in us. Can we, do we have the ability to always know that we have a bias? No, of course not. But to be able to approach a given situation and show the compassion, that is important. So bringing it all together, this is what I learned about compassion and why God humbled me so harshly. The last verse puts together the idea of compassion, but more to the point, understanding. One cannot have true compassion if one does not fully understand or take into consideration all things that make up the issue we are being compassionate about. So, if there's a given situation that we heard about, and we are downloading a certain amount of information about this, we can only give out a certain amount of compassion. And even if we have the full information, sometimes, as I said, I would argue, this is more my opinion, I would argue that our own thoughts, our own biases, might get in the way of truly being able to be compassionate. Or be compassionate to the fullest extent, shall we say. So when taking all this into consideration, this does not mean one is compromising your belief, your morals, or even faith. This idea may take some time to understand, as the compassion, the empathy is not about you, it is about the other person. And it is about the other person, and it is about doing for them, that person, what God has done and continues to do for us, which is to listen, love, be kind. Can't actually read that one. Be patient and have the greatness of understanding. And I think the understanding part is the bigger picture beyond in this, is that God has understanding in all things. And if we cannot understand, then that also hinders our compassion. I would like to finish with a quote by Henri J.M. Nouwen. I've actually never heard of this guy. I did a random search, Christian quotes about compassion, and I think that he really puts this all together. Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter in places of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion challenges us to cry out with those in misery, to mourn with those who are lonely, to weep with those in tears. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human. And that's the biggest thing right there. And that's what I was trying to say. In order to fully understand what being compassionate means, you have to immerse yourself in every synapse of that person and what they're going through. And you have to be able to embrace it and live it with them. Knee deep in the mud. Go through everything that they're going through. So, in closing, the question then is, who else would have accomplished this than Jesus, who died for us? Right? And that's how I pretty much finished my thought process. I actually kind of blew right through that. But I do want to close with a quote, with a Bible verse that I love, and I think actually kind of fits into this, simply like I said, because God really hunkered down on me with this process. It is Job chapter 6:24. It is one that I thoroughly enjoy. It says, "Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand where I have gone astray." And it's so important to me because I want to do the right thing. I want to understand how to do better and what I've done wrong. Because unless I understand what I've done wrong, I can't go better. I can't do better. So that's it. Yeah?
Going back to what you said about the 80s and people not understanding people's disabilities, and I remember that's when they deinstitutionalized all people with disabilities. Nobody knew how to interact with it. They didn't play with it. And out of that, I think it was 1990, we had the Americans with Disabilities Act, and we did that. So if a man wheeled up to a building a lot of stairs, he could go to ramp, and that's good. That's all well and good. Then one morning I'm watching some silly kids show, and they were talking about the difference between America and I forgot what country they were in, another civilized country. And what's wrong? Anyway, the guy wheels up and he's got no ramp, and 9 people come out of nowhere and lifts his wheelchair up and brings it to the top. And therein is the difference between the Christian and the non-Christian, where the difference between the active and the heart. We care and we do something active, we don't fun. But we don't sacrifice of ourselves. We don't, the heart, and the Christian, the human nature, by human. And I just thought that was a beautiful picture that they reached out of themselves and acted with them, and that's what Christ does for us.
No, of course. And what I find even more amazing is even the average person on the street, you'll see those kindness. you don't know what they're about, what their faith is or whatever, but you still see that love that goes through. I mean, I started volunteering at a camp when I was 14 years old for mentally and physically disabled. I did it for 10 years. And as God would have it, he consistently brought me right back to human services. No matter which way I went, I'm right back where I started. And that was, I think, I mean, however you want to describe it, that's who I am. But I also feel that everybody can do that, regardless of what your beliefs are, if you're just willing to, again, be compassionate and not have that fear or.
I don't think I could differentiate Christian and non-Christian. Maybe Christ-like behavior, not Christ-like.
Okay.
You don't have to know Christ to be compassionate.
Sure.
Do the right thing.
Sure.
And you don't always do the right thing just because you know Christ.
Right.
I guess I shouldn't have differentiated.
No, that's quite right.
It's, like I said, it's a heart issue.
Of course.
You know, you see people that kind of, I dare say we see them less and less now as the world spins.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty sad, seeing some really cold things even coming from the Christian community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wait, you said that social constructs prevented us or caused us to hold back. What would you be able to clear out what those constructs are?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think you can pick pretty much anything. I mean, if you indulge yourself in too many action movies or too many horror movies, and you become more cold in the heart, or you become less helpful towards people. I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is that again, my willingness to volunteer to help people, it wasn't even something that my parents ingrained in me. It just happened. It was my mother who encouraged me to go to this camp, and though I mumbled and grumbled, it was probably the best thing that she's ever done for me in this case. And I learned compassion. And not only did I learn compassion by understanding what they are about, but I also learned compassion for myself, because at the time I didn't have a lot of friends. And I learned how to make fun of myself. I was always picked on. So the main, I guess the point where I really started to realize it is that my friend Devry, I've been friends with her since she was 13. She's 35 years now. In the meantime, we talk almost every week. I talked to her today. And through Devry, through the other kids, the other adults, it was a wide range of age. I began to realize that Devry was just different because she's stuck in a body that doesn't work, or she's mentally stuck in a brain that does not function well. And that's the only difference. And what I'm trying to say is the social construct of that is, at least the example of the 80s, well, they're different. And because they're different, we don't like them, or we're not nice to them, or we don't help them. So whatever kind of the same application you can give now, I think that would be pretty much the same thing. I mean, does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, when I think about the compassion in other people, I think the biggest thing that would prevent it would be their thinking who you think you are
Mm-hmm.
to approach you.
Mm-hmm. Well, because then it's seen as pity, which actually is a really good point. Now, the definition that I took was from the Merriam-Webster. There was another one from Oxford, which did have the word pity as part of being compassionate. And I honestly, I think that's kind of where my bias came in, because I don't think that pity really fits into being compassionate. I don't go to somebody out of pity. I go to somebody because I care and I want to help. And I from my perspective, I think that those are two different things.
So I think the idea of, as Dottie was saying about ramps versus people picking you up and carrying you in is that it was somewhat wisdom to put the ramps in
Mhm.
to reduce their dependability on people, to give them a air of independence.
Of course, very important,
And,
absolutely.
But I have seen where people have done just what she said, even in this country, where they would come out and offer to pick you up. Bring you in.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's, and I mean,
Person ranch, I always understood, I thought that was great.
Yeah, oh, I know you did.
yeah, and
I wasn't, I was just saying that that's probably why those things got done first.
Yeah.
right, and my experience being in the hospital for 4 months after I had my back surgery, not being able to walk, not having to learn everything. The nurses, the personnel that were with me were extremely compassionate. I mean, they were such an amazing crew of people, and I think about them often. That was part of, I think that I did a lot of attic cleaning during the time, and I think I got a lot closer to God in those 4 months, probably than I did in a while at that point. But I think also the compassion and the love and the willingness that those staff showed me, and potentially that of my wife, it was amazing because my wife, she drove from Vermont to Boston like every other weekend or every weekend, and that was, for her, that was a feat. That was one of those things that she's never done before, and that was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So that's what I would call being compassionate. And now that I hope am I still, do I still have time? Okay. So my point, right, so bring it to the next level of the relationship, okay? It just occurred to me, when you're married and you spend the 50 years or the 70 years or even the shorter time, it doesn't matter, and something really big and bad happens, God forbid, the spouse being there and supporting and doing everything in their power to help, that's true compassion. Because they're crying for you, they're hurting for you, they're anxious, they're worried, they're everything that you're going through at exactly that moment. And that's exactly what I'm going for.
I keep thinking of verse like a 6:8, which says, a 3-point outline, it says, he has showed me, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require, but to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God. Do rightly, do justly, do right, live with integrity, show mercy, show kindness, compassion, kindness and mercy. I think of the song, show of goodness and mercy, falling all day in the light. But we should show that mercy and kindness, not that they deserve it, but we give it out of love and kindness. Anyway.
No, and that's a really good point, because like I said, and I'll get to you in a second, Ken, I promise. But that's part of what I was trying to say in the manner of the compromise, okay? So if you have like a mother or a father or a spouse, a brother, sister, whatever it is, who has a mental illness like schizophrenia or some kind of whatever it is, how much more do you put in? In other words, how much more effort? They're not able to, control their behavior, because that is what their illness is about. And so from my perspective, and this is what I was saying about Easter seals, after a while, because we were technically not allowed to be compassionate anymore, because we were told to be their friends, not their parents. The aspect of the adult to the child was erased. And so, it's a little bit of a different form of compassion, but what I'm trying to say is that in being compassionate, you are showing a adult love, a tough love, or whatever it is, but only to a certain point, because you don't want to degrade their current stress that they're going through, right? So, and that's what I'm saying, and that's where I found that my bias, my own thoughts disallowed me to be fully compassionate, because I I got more annoyed at the end with Easter seals. So I wasn't able to fully extend my compassion anymore, because, and Candy knows, by the time we left, oh, it was done. I mean, I was there for 7 years. I was one of the longest staff. Usually it's a 10-month turnaround. I was there for 7 years. And I was one of the longest lasting staff there. And I was done. I was finished. I would argue that Candy can say that my entire personality, my entire character probably changed overnight, just from getting away from there to something else. Candy?
I would say it could be seen as a spectrum of kindness, where pity is like the first step, it's surface kindness. You're, recognizing, oh, that's terrible, I feel so bad for you. Then you get to empathy, which is deeper, because you're actually thinking more deeply about what it is that's, they're suffering. You're actually thinking, spending some energy to truly understand. And then compassion can be seen as the willingness to act on that empathy, that understanding, to try to help the individual in that situation, however you can. Sometimes you can't magically wave a wand and be like, I'll fix the problem. But sometimes small acts of kindness through compassion can make the day completely different.
Right, no, and that's the point, because I would argue being compassionate is not, you're not being compassionate to fix, you're being compassionate to be there, to go through everything. If you can fix, if you can help, sure, I think that's a perk. But I think ultimately it is there, as it says, to be in the full immersion in the condition of being human. And that's what it boils down to. So, I mean, talk about war soldiers or people who work for the ambulance or the fire department, the police. If they save somebody, but they know that they're most likely not going to make it, or they were in a horrific accident, they're not there. The person who's in that condition is not there holding the fireman's hand because he thinks the fireman, or even wants the fireman to fix him. He wants to hold his hand because he wants compassion. He wants reassurance. The fireman, the person who is in that moment with the one in duress, is, as I said, knee deep in mud at that given moment with that person. Everything else doesn't matter. It's just that person. It's not even about the person who saved him. And that's what compassion is.
I don't know if I heard you wrong, or, and Fred, you say something about separating, fixing the problem with compassion? Because sometimes we don't know, we have to be taught how to respond to that, how to respond.
Oh, no, of course.
So I think I probably heard you wrong, because fixing it, we're trying to fix it, sometimes it comes out of ignorance, but sometimes, and there's a Holy Spirit that, but I sometimes struggle with you guys, then you walk, and you need to fix it, when we need to hear about it.
Right, no, I understand what you're saying, and I agree. Yeah, no, I agree, but that's why I was trying to make that slight distinction in that, yeah, no, I think that the overall, the purpose of compassion is not necessarily to fix, okay? But in the end, if you can fix, or as Candy said, if you can at least even help towards fixing, that's amazing. I mean, that's part of the process, if it comes into fruition. Clark?
Just thinking about what the wet blankets are today, why we shy
Yeah.
Today, with all these media, barrages that we get every day, when we see somebody on the side of the road that obviously needs help, we are really reluctant to get involved because we don't know if you're gonna have a rifle staring you down the next.
Sure.
I guess all I can say with that is that we really need to rely on the Holy Spirit to prompt us in those things, and not necessarily jump into them blindly.
Mhm.
But I think God is very willing to prompt us in those situations.
Right.
I know my daughter is much more willing to jump into some situations than I would ever be. She's been kind of an inspiration to me with that because she does not have a fear of doing that. We are not to have a spirit of fear. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. So,
Mm.
I think a lot of it is just a matter of jumping in on some of these things.
No, sure.
And not
No.
just, we've got situations here where, we need to feel those 9:30 phone calls and go on for an hour. That's tough sometimes. It's tough.
Well, and that's, yeah, and that's the perfect example right there. So, I know what you're referring to. And so when you consistently have that same phone call from that same person, you start getting annoyed. And your frustration starts coming up and your lack of patience starts coming up. So how do you fulfill that compassion? Okay? Or the timing, the time factor that you said. We as humans, we as people, we are so, again, the societal norms of what are we doing? We're on the phone all the time. I even find myself falling into that trap now, more and more, though I try very hard not to. But we are sucked into that, and it's not necessarily made easy not to be sucked in, right? But how do you conquer that, and how do you then still have compassion for a person? So like I said, with the phone call example, how are you able to overcome that frustration? Overcome that, and I'm not saying this is what you do, but in my case, I would definitely be like, oh boy, here we go again, right? But that's not compassionate, right? That's like, oh great, I have to deal with this. You're interfering with my time.
Well, it isn't necessarily compassion to virtue yourself.
No, for sure.
There's a balance.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, it's all about setting boundaries, so isn't it?
yes,
We need to be interruptible.
yeah,
But, I had that person, and unfortunately, my mother lived next door, and my door or something, she was challenging me. And so there had to come a time for me to raise my family and interact with my husband. I had to be able to say, half an hour, let's do such and such, and then try to redirect the conversation. But as we're just letting them go on and on and on and on, how are we even helping them? So it's about setting boundaries, and I don't know where they are. It's not
No.
trust.
no, and I don't know who it was that was saying it, but blindly going into it. I think it was Clark. You were saying having that discernment, that spiritual discernment, or even on a different level, the normal level of, well, I always call it, I got yellow flags going off or red flags going off. I've always had a very strong sense, even when I was a child, if there was somebody, especially as I got into teenager, if there was somebody that I was introduced to by somebody else that I knew, there were times where instantaneously I was like, nope, I don't want nothing to do with you. But you have to allow that incorporation to be able to, as you said, make the discernment and not allow yourself to get sucked into it, right? Being compassionate does not mean sacrificing yourself for everything and anything, right? So, but it means when the time comes, again, to be in the fullness of the human condition, whatever it is at that moment. Denise?
Well, that compassion sounds very familiar to agape love. Because it is the love of God that allows us to be compassionate.
Right. Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.